Welcome to the Global Gaming Business Podcast, the industry's first and longest running podcast, now in our 19th year. This podcast is sponsored by iGamingPlayer.com, the premier affiliate marketing site that delivers quality players to your online casino, sportsbook, or poker room with transparency and integrity. My guest today is Joe Asher, the president of PlaySports at IGT. It's great to see you today. How have you been for the last year? It's been a year since we saw you, since the last Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. It's amazing the Super Bowl's in Las Vegas this year.
That's exciting. Yeah,
quite a change.
Sure. Well, obviously, it's just days away now. Give us your experience when it comes to down through the years and what you think this year will be different because it is in Las Vegas in terms of betting.
Well, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot of difference in the betting because it's in Las Vegas, because even when the Super Bowl's not here, so many people come to Vegas for the Super Bowl. But obviously betting has evolved so much over the last few years as all the new states have legalized sports betting. And of course, it's a great matchup this year. I mean, just a terrific matchup with two rabid fan bases, one passionate San Francisco with a short trip here, one becoming a little bit spoiled with Kansas City, but they travel in force, and then you layer on all the attention that the Chiefs get because of Taylor Swift, and it's just it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, we got a lot of new states. 4 or 5 since last year that have come on. Florida, in particular, I spoke with Jim Allen last week, and he was saying they're knocking them dead with their operation down there. Are you involved in that at all?
We're not involved in it. We're not involved in it, but funny enough, I was actually on the way here earlier. I was talking to a friend of mine who was there last weekend, and we're all friends with Dave Honeymeyer, who runs the property down there. Great guy, and just talking about the amount of business that sports book is doing, both the retail book, but obviously much more significantly the online book. It's just doing massive numbers, just massive numbers, as you'd expect, right? Florida, it's Florida, and it's the only game in town. But that place is just crushing it.
Yeah, no question about it. So let's talk about the Super Bowl bets. There's always a lot of prop bets at the Super Bowl, much more than a regular season game. I'm wondering, though, how much of those bets translate to the online thing. I know you can go to the books here in Vegas and you can bet almost anything, but I've noticed in some of the online things you don't get the wide variety of bets you do at the in-person book.
Well, I think look, during the William Hill era, we tried to put everything on the app. So I'm not sure what you'd have in the retail sports book that you couldn't also bet on the app. And obviously props are at their zenith on Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, you have them throughout the year and on so many games, but Super Bowl Sunday is one where folks want to have a little bit more action and action throughout the game. And of course, it used to blow me away when I see the money that was bet on, the coin toss, all the way through to who's going to be named the MVP of the game. So, it sort of starts before the kickoff, ends after the kickoff. And there's so much action around it. And I think props are becoming more and more popular, clearly, with the spread of sports betting across the country. And just even on this, this playoffs. I mean, I've been betting a few of them and friends of mine have been betting a few of them, but it definitely ratchets up another level when it comes to the Super Bowl.
So the live betting, the in-person or the live betting, in-game betting. Last week, I was really tempted to bet San Francisco when they were down so much at the half, and of course I would have crushed that one. Is that picking up as well, the live betting?
Absolutely, and the scenario you identify is obviously a big one when when the favorite gets down early. People like to bet on them to come back and win, and so a lot of people were on San Francisco, when they were down at the half. And down 17, and so that's the type of thing that it's appealing because you can get a good price on them to come back. And to some extent, there's some hedging too, right? If you had Detroit early, you can come back and bet San Francisco, and you got a nice juicy middle going for you as well.
Yeah. So how does your analytics figure that out? I mean, I saw at the half on one of my apps, it wasn't that much of a advantage on San Francisco, even though they're down so much. I think it was like 3-1, which I would think it would even be higher than that.
Well, in a situation like that, it's going to be shaded down, because everybody's going to be on that side. So the price does get shaded down. And you used to see it back in the sort of the quintessential example of that was the Falcons-Patriots Super Bowl, when the Patriots were down big early in the game against the Falcons, and even at halftime, and everybody and their mother and their cousin and their father-in-law was betting on Brady to come back and win. And he of course did, and I remember sportsbooks just got pummeled on that game. But obviously there are times when it doesn't happen, and so nobody's asking for sympathy when it does. But there have been some high-profile ones where where the sportsbooks take a beating because the popular public side, that's what people are gonna bet. And as I say, especially when it's Brady, who people love to bet anyway.
So what are some of the more obscure bets that you think people should pay attention to? Obviously, the coin flip is the first one. I just read today that somebody had bet $100,000 on the coin flip. I mean, that's pretty incredible. But what are some of the other kind of out of the ordinary bets?
Well, I mean, there's so many, Roger. Whether a certain player is going to get over or under a certain number of receiving yards. Or rushing yards, or what have you. Obviously, the yards for the quarterback is very popular. So I'm not sure those are necessarily obscure. I mean, the obscure stuff is probably comparing the number of points that a team is going to score with a totally different sport that might be going on at the same time. And so you do see some of that sort of thing, but the bread and butter is around the interesting players, the big players. I mean, obviously, how many receiving yards is Kelsey going to get? How many passing yards for Mahomes? Will Purdy throw an interception or not? I mean, that's the type of stuff that is the bread and butter.
I remember this year, Josh Allen, I think he scored a rushing touchdown in almost every game. I mean, that was pretty incredible. But of course, it came down as he was doing that. But that, if you could have bet that ongoing, you would have made a lot of money.
Me and a friend of mine were betting, will Jalen Hurts score a touchdown? And because you have the brotherly shove or the tush push. Going for you when you're betting the Eagles, especially when they were going good. Obviously, the wheels came off pretty significantly at the end of the season. But that type of stuff is obviously very popular. And this year, you're going to have obviously the Mahomes, Kelsey focused props, and maybe Isaiah Pacheco to some extent because he's been so instrumental. And then obviously on the flip side of the ball, it's going to be Purdy and McCaffrey and some of those receivers, Ayuk and Debo. So that's where the most of the focus will be.
Yeah, no question. So before sports betting became really popular, the best way you could gamble was the squares. I mean, is there any action on those kind of things in the legal sports books?
I mean, there's some of it. I know Circa does
they do it,
their Circa squares, so there's a little bit of it, but it's not huge by any stretch.
Right. I remember winning a couple of those quarter ones, and I made my money back. So it worked out well. So you mentioned McCaffrey. This is the first time he's in the Super Bowl, and every time the last few years up until this point, the 49ers didn't have him. So do you think he's going to be a real big element here?
Oh, sure. McCaffrey's a big element for them because, yeah, obviously, that opens up the passing game as well when you
Right.
gotta, when you gotta try to defend the run with a guy of that
Sure.
level. He really totally opens up the passing game for them, and I think he's a huge part of that
Sure,
offense.
sure. So let's talk about the action on the NFL this year. It seems to have really, really exploded. I know New Jersey had a record number of sports bets in December when the playoffs, when the end of the season, the playoffs started. What's your impression on the action that the NFL got this year?
All-time high.
Yeah.
It's at its zenith. And you see it in the viewership. I think the game, the Niners game was the highest rated non-Super Bowl of all time. So you're certainly seeing it in the TV ratings and the engagement. And clearly, the legalization of sports betting is fueling that for sure. Because now in the pregame show, they're telling you what the point spread is, and the guys are picking against the point spread, whereas historically that was something they wouldn't do. And then of course you have the advertising, which of course is going to drive engagement, drive interest to it. So what folks who are working in the sports betting industry before the fall of PASPA, would always tell you that this is what was going to happen, and sure enough, that's being proven out.
Sure.
So yeah, no, the NFL is at its peak for sure right now.
Okay, great. So then the next big betting opportunity is March Madness, of course, and that's always been crazy in Vegas. People come and just camp out at the sports books on that Thursday and Friday, and it's really an exciting time. Do you expect that to kind of hit a record this year as well?
I don't see why it wouldn't, right?
Yeah.
The economy continues, knock on wood, to be pretty strong right now, and the folks who were in the recession camp have now kind of moved to the soft landing, and there's just so much going on, and I'm very bullish on Las Vegas.
Sure,
I mean, as somebody who lives here, you just sort of see it. I mean, we're sitting not too far from the new Durango Casino, which is fantastic, and that's sort of reflective, I think, of the energy around Vegas, and obviously sports is sort of ratcheted that up. We've got new property online now with the Fontainebleau, and so there's just so much happening in this town, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Sphere, which is become an iconic part of the skyline so quickly, and people are flying in from around the world to come to an event, to see an event at the Sphere and see U2 at the Sphere. I mean, it's had a big impact on this town.
No question about that. So last year we had the spring leagues, 2 football spring leagues, and I know they didn't get a lot of action this year, but this year they've combined. They finally unified. It's called the United Football League. Do you think there's going to get more action this year because of that?
Maybe a little bit. It's not to the point of ultimately really moving the needle like March Madness will do, or NBA, or in this town a little bit. There's a little bit of hockey betting because everybody's into the Golden Knights. But I think it kind of picks up a little bit. But it's got to be people becoming familiar with the product, and I think that it has not been proven that the American consumer wants year-round football.
Right.
Some of us kind of get a little depressed when the Super Bowl is over and we got to wait another 6 months until it comes back. Right. I'm a big football fan. I love watching it. Yeah. But some people are much more into pitchers and catchers returning. I was talking to somebody back east. I was talking to somebody back east the other day who's a big Phillies fan, and he was talking about it. So as Americans, we sort of seem to like our seasonality of sports, and I haven't seen anything to indicate that that's going to change.
Right. Well, there's got to be a big baseball uptick this year with Ohtani with the Dodgers. I mean, I'm wondering what the over/under is for the total victories for the Dodgers. It's got to be 105 at least, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a big number, and it's so perfect with Ohtani to the Dodgers too, and the implications for that on the international level.
Sure.
And you'll you'll see a lot of that, obviously.
Yeah.
Like you did, previously with other players. But I mean, Ohtani to the Dodgers is just it's perfect.
Let's go back to college football for a second here. With this new NIL rule and the transfer portals and things like that, does that make it much more difficult to handicap college football?
Well, maybe a little bit kind of leading into the season, but at some point you know who the players are, right? So it doesn't really change it. I do think it's totally changing the game of college football. You wonder to what extent the transfer portal, maybe motivated Saban to leave at the end of the season as he did. When you look at what Deion Sanders was able to do with Colorado, would not have been possible without the transfer portal, and I'm I've totally bought into the Deion hype and looking forward to seeing what they do next year. So it's definitely transforming college football. Deion generated a lot of interest. With Colorado, even though they wound up having kind of a
he won the first 5 games and then went into the tank, right?
Yeah, people kind of caught on, but it definitely got more people engaged in betting football. I think the question now is just going to be what happens with the coaching departures, right? Not only Saban, but obviously Harbaugh is gone from Michigan, and he's going to be hanging out in L.A. And so there's that sort of recycling of or changing of the guard, I suppose is a better way to put it, in terms of the coaching.
Great. So last year I went to a conference called Bet Bash, put on by Spanky, the professional sports bettor, who's kind of legendary in the world of sports betting. Talking to him, I asked him, what's the best sport for a professional sports bettor to bet, and he said without question college basketball, because there's so many teams out there that if you get just a little information about a team that maybe one of the major sports bettors doesn't get, sports betting sites don't get, you can get an edge. Is that? Do you find that to be true on this side of the equation?
I think that's right. I think that's right, because there are so many games going on, and especially when you get into totals, as well as opposed to the sides, and anything where the line is less mature, less and the betting is less liquid. Clearly, I think there's opportunities for people to to find an edge. I mean, when you think about it, from the way I always looked at it is the bettor gets to pick and choose his spots, right? We may have thousands of betting propositions available, and you kind of got to have the line right on all of them, and so the bettor gets to sort of pick and choose the 1, the 2, the 3 where they think there's value in the line. Doesn't mean they're going to win every bet, but clearly they're going to have an edge going into it. And you have people who become very knowledgeable on a particular niche sport, or a particular conference, for instance, in college basketball, and that can give them a real edge.
Yeah, no question. Well, let's talk about IGT PlaySports. Last time we talked, you explained to me how you can service small sports books as well as the larger ones. How's it been going since then? And you seem to be pretty ubiquitous, around the industry.
Well, the business, knock on wood, is in a pretty good place, and grew year on year. Clearly, new states opening up would be advantageous to us, as give us an opportunity to expand into those new jurisdictions. But we are fortunate enough to have FanDuel as one of our key customers, and obviously that business has been doing well, both the retail business here in the U.S., their online business in Ontario. In fact, I was just making my plans to go up to Toronto for when the Golden Knights are playing up there to visit with our customers. Coincided with that. The Rhode Island Lottery, another big customer of ours, and there's been an expansion in the way the mobile betting there has been going. And then, of course, we have a really good penetration throughout the country with a number of tribes, right? IGT has historically had a great relationship with tribes across the country, and we're fortunate enough to work with a number of tribes that have, very significant sports books, whether it's, the United Tribe in Green Bay, where, the Packers had a great run at the end of this year, and that place was doing really well. It was about the only sports book in America that didn't crush it when the Packers, knocked off the Cowboys. I mean, that was a huge game for sports books across the country. Not as much in Green Bay, but that's okay. I was down week before last in New Mexico at the Santa Ana Sports Book, which, by the way, is one of the nicest sports books I've seen. I'd encourage anyone to get out there and see that place. I love the design of that sports book. It's just terrific. Great place to hang out, watch a game, make a bet. Snoqualmie and Angel of the Winds and Colville up in the state of Washington, where sports betting is limited to the tribes and on reservation. So we have a real niche in that state as well. Down in North Carolina, the Two Kings property is done really well. So that's been a pretty nice, a little bit under the radar perhaps, but a really nice business, and I enjoy visiting those places. I just totally enjoy it. It's a day trip to go to New Mexico from here in Las Vegas, and I went up to Green Bay. It was a Packers-Lions game on Thursday night, which is kind of perfect for me because I like to be here for the weekends for my kids' sports. It's easy to travel though to be there for a Thursday game. And I happen to have been back in D.C. for a Wilson Center board meeting, and then was able to fly out for the Packers-Lions game, and so it was a real experience to see a game at Lambeau. It didn't go well for the home team, but there was a lot of blue in that stadium that night.
No question about it. So give us your view of the state of the health of the sports betting industry. I mean, there's so many operators out there, and some of them have already pulled back. I know Wynn is getting out of Massachusetts. I forget which one. There's another one of the online operators is also pulling back. Is there? Do you see consolidation coming along at any point here when it comes to the operators?
Yeah, and I haven't seen Wynn leaving Massachusetts. They've left a number of other
I think that's just
places
on the agenda today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't catch that before we recorded this. Clearly the market concentration at the top end of the market is substantial, right? FanDuel and DraftKings have done such a really amazing job of getting market share, and then below that you have MGM and Caesars, with the William Hill business, and then what they've built out subsequent to that. You have Penn with ESPN now, and
that was a pretty healthy launch there.
Healthy launch, strong downloads, and obviously the question is, where they take it, forward from here, and Fanatics, trying to figure out what their strategy is, I suppose, but you'd be remiss to. They get some really smart people, and obviously a very well capitalized company. So betting against smart people with a lot of money is a pretty dangerous game. So beneath that, it's it's kind of tougher. You have folks who are doing niche things, perhaps like Circa, where in addition to having their betting, it's also great marketing for that beautiful property that Derek's built downtown. But but it's kind of tough. How, what's the differentiator that you have that is somehow going to cause somebody to switch from one of the existing operators, or to move a material portion of their business over, not just when they're getting the extra half a point or 5 cents. Bet365 is the other one that kind of deserves a mention there, because they have managed to make a little bit of an imprint in a select number of states, but they're obviously drawing on a very, very strong business internationally.
So there's been a bit of a blowback on advertising by sports books. I mean, every time I go on Twitter, people are complaining about, oh, another sports betting ad in the middle of the Super Bowl. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some major sports betting ads there as well. And of course, Ontario is going through some crazy regulations that they're I don't know, they might be great regulations. I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of give and take between the operators and the government up there. Do you think that's going to be a major problem at some point, or do you think the industry will kind of police itself?
It's a tough one, right?
Yeah.
In other parts of the world, we've seen everything from bans on advertising to significant restrictions on advertising, and it's a tough one to police internally because you can control what your company does,
right,
but you have no ability to control what all the other companies do. And when there are a lot of operators, you know, that's going to lead to a lot of advertising. I remember a couple years ago, I happened to have been in Delaware on a Sunday night where you get the Philadelphia market. You know, there's a couple commercials for FanDuel, a couple for DraftKings, a couple for BetMGM, a couple for Caesars. There was, you know, one for Bet Rivers, you know, and another one for somebody. And you know, so no one company was advertising a lot, but you know, all of them collectively was a lot.
Yeah.
You know, the NFL has limited the number of ads per broadcast. You know, but then you have all the shoulder activities. So. Look, I think it's a real tough one. Obviously, we're going to see it in the Super Bowl. I think Gronk is going to try to do his kick again, and, you know, and there'll be others advertising. So, you know, the other piece to this, of course, is the focus is always around TV advertising. But so much of the advertising is in your social media feed.
Sure, right, yeah.
And I think I read that, you know, BetMGM may be doing something with X, and you know, formerly known as Twitter. Kind of like Prince. You know, when I happen to have been in Arizona right after that state launched sports betting, and you know, you open up your Facebook feed and it was just one, you know, betting ad after another.
Right.
So you know, the focus is around TV, but you know, it's prevalent in other areas. Very difficult to control. You certainly can't control it at the state level.
Right.
You know, we'll see if it ever gets to the point where Congress decides to get involved.
Right. So there's also some criticism about how the leagues are involved with the sports betting operators. You know, the NFL has, you know, the official sports book of the NFL, that kind of thing. Is that also a problem? Does that call into question the integrity of the sports itself?
Well, I don't know if it calls into integrity, and they kind of put their imprimatur on a select number. But you know, it's kind of amazing when you think about the progression of this. In 2003, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Bureau wanted to advertise during the Super Bowl broadcast. And they didn't even want to advertise gambling. They wanted to show the old, you know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas commercial. That commercial was rejected. You know, the NFL turned it down, didn't want to be associated with Las Vegas. Fast forward 21 years, a particularly, you know, appropriate number when we're talking about Las Vegas, but fast forward 21 years and the Super Bowl is going to be played, you know, at Allegiant Stadium right behind Mandalay Bay.
Right.
So to go from, we don't even want to be associated with Las Vegas in 2003 to, you know, the game is going to be here in 2024 is sort of an amazing shift.
Right.
And it, you know, it shows the evolution, I think, of gambling more broadly, but certainly of sports betting. You know, obviously, you know, there's been intermediate events along the way, right? You know, the Raiders coming to town, you know, which was preceded by the Golden Knights coming to town. But it's been an amazing shift. And, you know, I happened to have been to the Starbucks not too far from here before coming in to meet you today. And, you know, the old, the Caesars building has the NFL logo on it.
Right, yeah.
Right? So it's like right on the side of the building, right at 215 in Rainbow, where they house their digital business. And so it's been, a pretty amazing evolution. And look, it's one that wasn't hard to see coming. I happen to have been in Washington a week or two ago and had dinner with Ted Olson, the lawyer who litigated the case, and we were talking about this evolution. And one of the things I remember is back in 2009 when the leagues sued Delaware. Delaware had wanted to offer broad sports betting, and the league sued them to limit it to parlays. And they were arguing that legal sports betting would bring irreparable harm to their business. But at the same time the league was making that argument, we had gotten a proposal from the Philadelphia Eagles to buy a suite for Lucky's Race and Sportsbooks. And so, it was always kind of incongruous, right? And so, clearly now we've seen that this argument that there's irreparable harm by legal sports betting on the NFL, well, I mean, that argument's been completely blown up. But it wasn't all that long ago.
Yeah, exactly. So, tell me where the growth of the industry is going to come from now. Obviously, we mentioned live in-game betting. That's got to grow. Is there any other niches? Obviously, a couple more states that are still going to come on, but is there any more niches that we can grab to really keep it growing, or are we almost at the saturation point?
Well, I think, look, the FanDuel, and I'm not just saying this because they're our customer and partner, but what they've done with single game parlays has been amazing, right? The historical rule was that if there was a correlation in the outcome of a bet, you typically couldn't bet it. You couldn't parlay that in a sports book. So something like, Eagles to win and Hurts to throw over 1.5 touchdowns, right? There's obviously a correlation between those two things, or, and conversely, Purdy to throw over 1.5 interceptions and the Niners to lose. And so historically, about the only thing you could parlay with some correlation is favorite and over, dog and under. Well, and the folks at FanDuel sort of figured out that, well, actually, if you price it right, you can offer the customer the ability to parlay those multiple bets from within a game. So Mahomes to throw for over 300 yards, Kelsey to catch a touchdown, and the Chiefs to win. Right? There's obviously a correlation between all those three, but if you price it right, the customer can bet that, and that allows the customer to win a greater amount, sort of like a jackpot type payout, which has always been popular in gambling, right? Whether it's the Wheel of Fortune slot machine, or in the early days of Delaware, the amount of action that we used to write on 10-team parlays was unbelievable, because it was that go for the jackpot type of mentality, and people want to risk a little possibility of winning a lot, but in any scenario they got something to root for throughout the game, right? And so I think that's been one of the really big innovations within sports betting that for folks who don't pay as much attention to the business side of the business, they could miss it, but that's been significant, as well as the expansion of in play and other things to enhance engagement. I do think that going forward, as the number of new states become smaller and smaller, just because many have already legalized it, increasing engagement on an app, giving people a reason to be on the app more frequently, rather than just transactionally to place the bet. I mean, I think there'll be a lot of effort in that regard. Much like you think, at current, it's a little bit like a banking app. I go on my banking app just to make a transaction, maybe to check a balance on something or pay a bill, but you're not on it a long time. Currently in sports betting, it's largely like that as well. You're just kind of on it for the specific purpose of making a bet. At the other end of the continuum are things like, Facebook or Instagram, or TikTok, for instance, where people spend a lot of time throughout the day on them. And I'm not a TikTok fan, but people spend a lot of time on these apps as opposed to the transactional aspect. I think you'll see an effort by operators trying to expand the average time that people spend on their platforms.
So the pending legalization of iGaming in a lot of states. I mean, it's been way slower than sports betting. I interviewed your counterpart on the iGaming side here at IGT, Gil Rotham, at G2E this year. How much conversation do you have with him, and do you think the legalization of iGaming would spur even more interest in sports betting?
Clearly the adoption of iGaming has been on a much slower trajectory than sports, and because you don't have the leagues behind it, and you don't have the media companies benefiting it from it so tremendously, and sports is so ubiquitous in our culture, so almost by because of all that, the pickup around iGaming becomes slower. Obviously, much more profitable for operators, and especially in a scenario
also
where
more profitable for the states.
Potentially, I mean, it depends on on how they tax it, but you don't have things like data costs or fees to the leagues that you might have. Now, conversely, you have taxes and you got to pay for content, there are other costs, but it's not driven by the mass consumer demand like you see at present with sports. So it would be a slower uptick for sure.
Okay, great. All right, one more question. You mentioned the Wilson Center. I think that's a pretty big honor to have the president appoint you to as chairman of that organization. Explain what that does and what your role is there.
Sure. So the Wilson Center was created by Congress in 1968 as the nation's official memorial to President Wilson, and it's a nonpartisan public policy think tank focused on foreign affairs, with a very vibrant fellowship program as well. There are, I think it's 14 institutes that are focused on different parts of the world, everything from the Middle East, which is obviously very topical today, Russia, very topical today, China, Mexico, Canada, Africa, Latin America, and so forth. And so you have these incredibly bright people who are focused on these particular regions, and they do research and publish it, and attempt to to present the facts so that then policymakers, the way I view it, our main audience is the Congress, and maybe the administration as well, but certainly the Congress, since they provide a good chunk of the budget as well. But it's not unusual for a member of Congress who's going to travel to a foreign country to ask for a briefing from the Wilson Center. It's headquartered in Washington, in the Reagan Building. And just last week there was a meeting of our Global Advisory Council, and I had the opportunity to interview the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. We also had the ambassador from the UAE was there, and the German ambassador was there, and and a number of really bright people, and it's just been fascinating to get to be involved in the organization and try to move things forward and help the team there under the leadership of Ambassador Mark Green, who's the CEO, but a great staff. And that fellowship program is very vibrant. I mean, former Wilson Fellows include people like Madeleine Albright, Tony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and the best and the brightest can become Wilson Fellows, and they get a stipend to study in their area of expertise. So I'm coming up on a year. I'm about 10 months into it since the president appointed me as chairman. and it's been just a tremendous experience. And the more I get into it, the more appreciative I am of the opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's a great honor, especially for somebody from the dirty gaming industry to get something like that. I mean, it's really shows the respect that you have, throughout the industry and even outside the industry.
Well, but I think it shows how the gaming industry has evolved in the perception
Right.
Of those outside the industry.
Sure.
Obviously, Sheldon Adelson had such a huge role on that.
Right.
Going, during his lifetime, and over time, the industry has just become so much more mainstream. It's obviously an important tax contributor in a number of states, and so to see sports betting industry in a White House press release may not have been something that folks would have thought about 10 years or so ago, but I think it does show the maturation
Sure.
of the industry and the general acceptability of the industry for sure.
Great. Well, Joe, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to the Super Bowl this year here in Las Vegas, and I'm sure you are too. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up next year before the next Super Bowl.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, sponsored by iGaming Player, the premier affiliate marketing site that delivers quality players to your online casino, sportsbook, or poker room with transparency and integrity. To learn more about the topics we just discussed, visit ggbmagazine.com. Subscribe to GGB News to get all the news of the gaming industry delivered to your desktop every Monday morning. Sign up at ggbnews.com and use the coupon code GGB180 for a free subscription. Don't miss a single episode of the podcast. Subscribe on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify today. So we'll see you next time on the GGB Podcast.